So it's been a long time since I've used this glove. I really like this glove too. It was a perfect glove for playing out in the outfield, and it's just been a while since I've used it because one of the last times I used it was a disaster. You see, what had happened was I used to play Little League baseball when I was a kid. I even played Pop Warner football a little while, even though I was the shortest kid on the team. I didn't play soccer very much, just 1 year of soccer, and that's because soccer really wasn't around when I was a kid. But I played softball or baseball and softball, and I absolutely loved it. And we always had a church team, and in fact, on our church team one time, some of you that are big Tigers fans, you may remember Matt Noakes. He actually played for our church softball league one time because we needed an extra person. He didn't use his real name at the time, and he was just a minor league player, but I'll tell you what, I've never seen anybody hit a ball so far as he hit it. Anyway, I had been asked to play in this church softball league, and it had been quite some time since I'd done it. And, I thought back to when I played softball, and I was never the best person on the team. I wasn't a great batter, but I'll tell you what, I was pretty fast when I was younger. And I could run down any fly ball. I'll tell you what, if there was a fly ball out in one of the fields, I would just get on my horse and I would run that thing down, and I would catch it. I would dive for it. I was something else out in the field. So been some time, and they asked me to play in this church softball league, and so I said, sure, I'll play. And so they stuck me out there in the field, and I'll never forget, this ball came, and it was a fly ball, and I ran back on it, and I stuck my glove up in the air, and I was just holding it up there, and there's no ball. And I turned around, and I looked back, and the ball was like rolling way back behind me. And I looked over the guy next to me playing center field, and I said, what happened? He goes, it was 10 feet over your head. And I thought, 10 feet over my head, from my eyes, from my vantage point, it was going right in the glove. I couldn't understand how it was 10 feet over my head. And I'll tell you what, I played out there, and almost every ball was 10 feet over my head, or just to my left, or just to my right. I got to where my glasses were so bad, I could not judge a fly anymore. And it embarrassed me because I'm out there, trying to do something that I used to be able to do, and I couldn't do it anymore. And it was one of those first moments where I was going, oh wow, my body's changed. I can't do the things that I used to be able to do. And I had other experiences where that kind of thing has happened to me, where things I used to be able to do, I can't do anymore. And it really made me sad. I mean, it really made me sad in that moment. But then what I recognized is that, who we are, our bodies, our abilities, that sometimes happens to us. The things about us that we used to be able to just do without ever thinking about it sometimes starts to get harder. And it's really hard when that happens to us. And sometimes we really struggle, and we want to just keep putting ourselves out there. And some would even say, no, you got to keep trying, you got to keep trying. But you know what? There's a place where it's not about that we keep trying. Sometimes I really think it's about trying to recognize that maybe there is a phase of who you are that has ended. And if that was simply the end, then, that's something to lament and be sad about. But I think as things end, there's other things that begin to be birthed. And when these other things begin to be birthed, it's those things that we begin to embrace, the things that maybe we hadn't thought about, the skills that maybe we had that had been going unused because we were using other skills at the time that now we can't use anymore. I really don't know that there's a great a super close parallel to this in Scripture. But as I was thinking about this idea, the scripture that came to mind was a scripture that comes right at the end of the second letter to Timothy. Now Timothy was one of Paul's students. Paul was kind of grooming him and teaching him and kind of molding him into becoming a leader that Paul knew he needed Timothy to be. But the reason Paul needed Timothy to be this kind of leader was because Paul knew that his time of doing the kind of ministry that he had done was coming to an end. And so at the end of this letter in 2 Philippians chapter 4, verse 7, Paul writes this: I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. From now on, there is reserved for me a crown of righteousness which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearance. You know, as I read that and I was thinking about this change that sometimes happens to us, what I realized was that was what Paul was facing. And as he's writing this to Timothy, things that he used to do that he just took for granted, he's now inviting Timothy to do those things because he's not going to be able to do those things. But right in turn, Paul is beginning to do those things that he can do better than anyone else. Because all throughout this letter, what he's doing is he's encouraging a younger pastor to become all that he can be. You see, Paul has moved from worrying about what he can do to now beginning to talk about what he knows Timothy can do. And so he's going to teach Timothy. He's going to encourage that younger generation to take up the mantle. He's able to continue to write. He's able to continue to find ways to encourage those younger leaders by writing to them and pointing out to them what their gifts are and helping them know how to mold those gifts. That's what Paul begins to do. And he does something else that I think we sometimes forget is probably one of the most powerful things we can do. And that is, he decides that his prayer life is going to move from a prayer life just about himself to a prayer life about those new leaders that are coming up. Now, Paul probably did that all the time, but I think now it really transformed to being more about what they can do. You know, another little quick story. When I went away to seminary, there was a woman in the church that I grew up in. Her name was Ruth Needham. And I'll never forget Ruth. She was probably 90 years old when I was heading off to seminary. And I was talking to her about all that she had done in the church and everything that she had accomplished in the church. And she says, you know, Scotty, that's what they called me. They called me Scotty. You know, Scotty, I can't do some of those things I used to be able to do. She goes, you know, I can't even read scripture the way I used to read it. I've got to listen to it on tapes now. But I'll tell you one thing I can do that's never going to go away from me. And that is I can pray. And I can tell you right now that while you go off to seminary, I'm going to be praying for you. Now, I'm convinced that one of the ways I got through seminary because Ruth was praying for me. That was something that she could do, no matter all the things that had changed in her life. So, the encouragement here is as you begin to see the changes that are happening in your life, and as you begin to let go of some of those things that you used to be able to do, don't lose courage, but begin to look to those things that you can do now. You can do now, those gifts that you have now that you can use. I think that's what Paul was bringing to Timothy.